Have you ever been in a room so beautiful, so perfect, that it made your skin crawl? A place where every polished surface, every perfectly arranged flower, seemed to whisper that you didn't belong. That was me. The night I met my fiancé's family for the first time. It was the beginning of the end. I just didn't know it yet. And trust me, by the time this story is over, you're going to want to know your own worth down to the last penny. So, if this already sounds like a wild ride, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because it's about to get a whole lot crazier. Let me back up. Before that night, my life with Alex was the kind of thing you see in romantic comedies. We met in the most cliché way possible, spilled coffee on his ridiculously expensive-looking suit in a downtown cafe. I was mortified, rambling apologies while trying to dab at the stain with a wad of cheap napkins. He just laughed, this deep, warm sound that made the entire cafe seem to brighten. His eyes, the color of warm honey, crinkled at the corners. "It's just a suit," he'd said. "But now you owe me a new coffee, and maybe your number." Just like that. I was hooked. Alex DeVere was everything I thought I wanted. He was charming, intelligent, impossibly handsome, and he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. For 2 years. Our life was a bubble of happiness. We'd spend weekends hiking, exploring hole-in-the-wall restaurants, and staying up all night talking about everything and nothing. He was a successful investment banker, and I told him I ran a small, independent tech consulting firm. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. It was just a radically understated version of the truth. Chen Innovations, the company I started from my college dorm room with $1,000 and an idea, was a little more than a small firm. We were the quiet engine behind some of the most successful logistical and data security software on the market. I had intentionally kept a low profile. I never wanted to be the face of the company. I wanted the work to speak for itself. My name, Evelyn Chen, was on the incorporation documents, but to the public, I was a ghost. It allowed me to live a normal life, to walk into a cafe and just be a woman who clumsily spilled coffee. Not a CEO responsible for hundreds of employees, an evaluation that was starting to make Wall Street nervous. Alex knew I was successful and self-sufficient, but he had no idea of the scale. And I liked it that way. I wanted him to love me, Evelyn, not the fortune my name carried. When he proposed under the cherry blossoms in Central Park, it was the easiest yes of my life. The ring was stunning, a classic solitaire that felt heavy and real on my finger. "Now you just have to meet the family," he'd said, his smile as bright as the diamond. "They're going to love you." Oh, the sweet, naive optimism of a man in love. The DeVere family home wasn't a house. It was an estate. A long, winding gravel driveway led up to a stone mansion that looked like it had been plucked from the English countryside and dropped into the most exclusive part of Connecticut. It screamed old money from every gabled roof and ivy-covered wall. As Alex parked his sleek black Mercedes, a knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. My 4-bedroom house in the city, which I had been so proud to buy with my own money, suddenly felt like a dollhouse. "Nervous?" Alex asked, squeezing my hand. "A little," I admitted. "This is a lot. Just be yourself. They'll see what I see." The massive oak door swung open before we even reached it, revealing a butler who looked like he'd been born in a 3-piece suit. He greeted Alex warmly and then turned his placid, vaguely judgmental gaze on me. "Welcome, Miss Chen." The inside was even more intimidating. Dark wood paneling, floors polished to a mirror shine, and what felt like hundreds of ancestral portraits staring down at me. Their painted eyes seemed to follow me, assessing me. A silent jury of long-dead DeVeres. The air smelled of lemon polish, old books, and money so old it had probably forgotten what a dollar bill looked like. And then I met her, Eleanor DeVere. She was standing at the entrance to a grand living room, a tall, slender woman in her late 60s with silver hair styled in a perfect, untouchable coif. She wore a simple but exquisitely tailored silk dress, and a string of pearls that probably cost more than my first car. Her smile was perfectly polite and utterly devoid of warmth. "So, you're Evelyn," she said, her voice smooth as glass. She didn't extend a hand, just gave me a slow, deliberate once-over that made me feel like I was a piece of livestock being inspected at auction. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. DeVere," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Eleanor, please," she corrected gently, though it felt more like a command. Beside her, Alex's father, Richard, a stoic man with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, gave a curt nod. Alex's sister, Catherine, a younger, sharper version of her mother, let her eyes drift over my simple black dress with a look of faint pity. "Alex, darling, why don't you get Evelyn a drink?" Eleanor said. Dismissing her son, it was clear who ran this house. She gestured for me to sit on a pristine, cream-colored sofa that I was terrified to even breathe on. "So, Alex tells us you're quite the career woman." The way she said career woman made it sound like a mild but unfortunate medical condition. "I run my own company, yes," I said, keeping my tone even. "How quaint," Catherine chimed in, sipping from a crystal glass. "What is it you do again? Something with computers?" "We develop data security and logistics software for e-commerce platforms," I explained. Their eyes glazed over. It was obvious they had no interest in the specifics, only in classifying me. I was a working girl, and in their world, that was a mark against me. The dinner that followed was a masterclass in polite, systematic interrogation. Every question was designed to highlight my otherness. "Chen," Richard said, swirling the red wine in his glass. "Is that a common name where your family is from?" He didn't have to say it, but the implication was clear, not like DeVere. "It's fairly common, yes," I replied. "My grandparents immigrated from Taiwan. They worked hard, started a small restaurant. My parents were the first in our family to go to college." I said it with pride. My family's story was one of resilience and hard work. "How lovely," Eleanor said, with the same enthusiasm one might use for a moderately interesting weather report. "A real American dream story. You must be so proud of how far you've come." It wasn't a compliment. It was a reminder of the distance between my world and theirs. They weren't interested in my journey. They were interested in the starting point, which, in their eyes, was several rungs below their own. Alex, my wonderful, loving Alex, was a different person in this house. He was quieter, more deferential. When his mother would make a subtle dig, I'd feel his foot tap mine under the table, a secret signal of solidarity, but he never spoke up. When Catherine asked if my dress was off the rack with a little smirk, Alex just cleared his throat and changed the subject to the stock market. His silence was a booming, deafening roar in the quiet, opulent dining room. The final and most telling. Blow came over dessert, a raspberry soufflé so delicate I was afraid to touch it. "You know, Evelyn," Eleanor began, placing her spoon down with a soft click, "marrying into a family like ours is a significant undertaking. The DeVere name carries a certain weight, a certain responsibility." I nodded, unsure of where this was going. "I understand. I'm not sure you do," she continued, her voice still smooth, but with an edge of steel. "It's not just about attending parties or charity galas. It's a full-time commitment. Our name is a legacy, one that has been carefully built over generations. The women who marry into this family understand that their primary role is to support their husbands and uphold that legacy." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Naturally, you'll be taking the DeVere name, and of course, you'll have to give up your little company. You can't possibly be expected to manage a household and a business. It simply isn't done." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked across the table at Alex, my eyes pleading with him. "Say something, defend me, defend us." He just looked down at his plate, a faint flush creeping up his neck. He picked up his own spoon and took a small, neat bite of his soufflé. He said nothing. Catherine smiled, a sharp, predatory little smile. "Don't look so worried, Evelyn. You're incredibly fortunate. Most women would kill for the opportunity to not have to work. You'll have a generous allowance. Of course, you can focus on what's truly important. Fortunate, that was the word they used. I was fortunate to be given the chance to erase myself, to abandon the company I had built from nothing, the name my parents had given me, the very core of my identity, all for the privilege of being called Mrs. DeVere. I don't remember much about the rest of the dinner. I think I smiled and nodded, my mind a whirlwind of shock and hurt. The ride home was quiet. The silence in Alex's car felt heavy, suffocating. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Your mother wants me to quit my job." It came out flat, devoid of emotion. Alex sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "I know. Look, Ev, that's just how she is. She's from a different generation. It's their way of showing they're serious about welcoming you into the family. By asking me to give up my life, I asked, my voice trembling now. She called my company a little company. Alex, she said I was fortunate to be allowed to marry you, and you just sat there. What was I supposed to do, he said, his voice rising in frustration. Start a fight at our first family dinner. They're my parents. They just need time to get to know you. Once we're married, everything will be different. They'll see how amazing you are. But I was beginning to see something different. I was seeing a man who would choose a quiet dinner over defending the woman he claimed to love. I was seeing a family that didn't want to welcome me, but to absorb me, to sand down my edges until I fit neatly into the DeVere family portrait. We pulled up to my house, and the silence returned. I love you, Ev, he said softly, leaning over to kiss me. I turned my head, and his lips met my cheek. I need some time to think, I whispered. He pulled back, a look of hurt in his honey-colored eyes, but for the first time. It didn't stir my sympathy. It just made me feel tired. As I walked up the steps to my own front door, the door to the house I had bought, I couldn't help but wonder, was I overreacting? Was this just the price of admission into a world of wealth and privilege? Or was this the biggest, reddest flag I had ever seen in my life? Waving frantically in a storm I was only just beginning to feel. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Because at that moment, I honestly didn't know the answer. The week after that first disastrous dinner was weird. It was like Alex and I were dancing around a giant hole that had opened up in the middle of our living room. We'd talk about work, about movies, about what to have for dinner, but we never talked about them. He was being extra sweet, bringing me flowers, leaving little notes on the bathroom mirror. It was his way of trying to plaster over the cracks, to pretend that the foundation of our relationship hadn't just been stress-tested and found wanting. I let him, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I loved him. I wanted to believe that he was right, that his family would eventually warm up to me. Have you ever tried to convince yourself of something you know, deep down, isn't true? It's exhausting. You spend all your energy trying to unsee the red flags, trying to reinterpret insults as jokes and condescension as a different generation's way of doing things. That was my life for the next month. And let me tell you, the DeVere family was not about to let me forget my place. The first volley came in the form of a phone call from Eleanor. She called on a Tuesday afternoon, right when I was in the middle of a tense negotiation call for a new server contract. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Oh, how I wish I had. Evelyn, darling, it's Eleanor. Her voice was like honey-laced poison. Sweet on the surface, but you just knew it was deadly. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. The unspoken end of that sentence was, anything you do couldn't possibly be as important as me calling you. Not at all, Eleanor. I lied, muting my conference call. It's lovely to hear from you. I was just thinking about you. Dear, I was flipping through the latest issue of Town and Country. You do read it, don't you? And there was a marvelous feature on the upcoming symphony benefit. The DeVeres have chaired the committee for 3 generations. I've taken the liberty of putting your name down to help with the floral arrangements. It will be a wonderful way for you to meet people. The right people. My jaw tightened. I hated floral arrangements. More than that, I hated the assumption that my time was completely open and available for her to schedule as she pleased. But I was still in trying to fit in mode. Oh, that's thoughtful of you. My schedule is a little hectic at the moment, but I'll see if I can move things around. Of course, dear, she'd purred. You'll find that once you're a DeVere, your priorities will naturally realign. Do try to keep that weekend free. Click. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. Alex, of course, saw it as a good thing. She's including you. That's great news, Ev, he'd said when I told him. He didn't understand that she wasn't including me. She was assigning me a role, the same way you'd assign a task to an assistant. The gifts started arriving next. They weren't gifts. They were corrections. A gift certificate to a stuffy. incredibly expensive couturier in the Upper East Side, with a handwritten note from Eleanor Darling. I thought you might find something more appropriate for the engagement party here. A beautifully bound set of books on the art of hostessing, a brochure for a week-long course on wine pairings. Each package that arrived at my door felt less like a present and more like a performance review where I'd received a failing grade. It was all leading up to the main event, the real test. Another phone call from Eleanor. Evelyn, you and I should have lunch, just us girls. There's a little place I adore near the club. I'll have my driver pick you up tomorrow at 1. Again, not a question, a directive. The little place was a century-old restaurant so exclusive it didn't even have a sign. The kind of place where the maître d' had gray hair and looked like he could trace his lineage back to the Mayflower. The air was thick with the scent of old money and quiet judgment. I, in my perfectly respectable but clearly not couture dress, felt like a crow that had accidentally wandered into a swan sanctuary. Eleanor was already there, seated at the best table, a picture of regal composure. She smiled that tight, polite smile as I approached. Evelyn, you're on time. Punctuality is such an important virtue, she said, as if I were a child who'd just earned a gold star for not being late. The lunch was a blur of tiny, expensive portions of food and a conversation that was anything but small. After a few minutes of superficial chatter about the weather, she got down to business. She folded her hands on the pristine white tablecloth, her diamond rings catching the light. Evelyn, she said, her voice dropping into a more serious, confidential tone. I want to be frank with you, as I know you're a practical girl. Alex is our only son. His happiness and the future of this family are our utmost priority. I nodded, my stomach twisting. Of course, mine too. Good, then you'll understand that his life has a certain trajectory. He's not just a man. He's a DeVere. That name comes with expectations. A man like Alex needs a wife who is his partner in every sense. Someone who can manage his home, who can host his business partners, who can navigate the complex social landscape he inhabits. It's a demanding role, a full-time profession. In fact, she paused, taking a delicate sip of her iced tea. Your little company, it's a wonderful achievement, truly, a lovely hobby. But it's time to think about your real future, your future as Alex's wife. My hands were clenched into fists in my lap. Hobby. The company I worked 80-hour weeks for. The company that was on the verge of a multi-million-dollar acquisition. The company that held patents that were making giants like Amazon and FedEx sweat. Was a hobby. We've seen what happens when women in our circle try to have it all, she continued, her eyes like chips of ice. The marriage is always the first thing to suffer. It's a distraction. We simply won't allow for that possibility with Alex's marriage. His future is too important. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list my accomplishments. To tell her that my little hobby was more innovative and probably more profitable than their dusty portfolio of inherited stocks. But I just sat there, my throat tight, and said nothing. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of her perfectly starched napkin. And then came the killing blow. She reached into her designer handbag and slid a slim, leather-bound folder across the table. It landed next to my water glass with a soft, final thud. We're not monsters, Evelyn, she said, a hint of that false warmth returning to her voice. We know this is a big transition. Richard and I have had our financial advisors draw this up for you, to make things easier. I opened the folder. Inside wasn't a contract, but a proposal, printed on heavy, cream-colored paper. It was a breakdown of a trust fund, a spousal allowance. They called it, a staggering amount of money would be transferred into a private account in my name. The number had a lot of zeros, enough to live a life of complete luxury without ever working another day. There was just one condition. The funds would be made available the day I provided them with a signed letter of resignation from my position as CEO of Chen Innovations. I stared at the paper, and you know what's funny? I didn't feel tempted. I felt insulted. Deeply, profoundly insulted. This wasn't a generous offer. This was a transaction. They were trying to buy my identity. They looked at me, at my life's work, and put a price tag on it. And the most insulting part, the number they came up with. The number they thought was so astronomical it would make me drop everything. Was a fraction of what my company was actually worth. They were trying to buy a rocket ship for the price of a used car. Have you ever had someone so fundamentally misunderstand who you are that it actually takes your breath away? That was me in that moment. I looked up from the folder and met Eleanor's expectant gaze. "This is very generous of you to think of." "Eleanor," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I'll need some time to consider it." "Of course, dear," she said, her smile indicating she thought the deal was already done. "Take all the time you need, as long as you have an answer before the engagement party." The drive home was a blur. I felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that made me me. Leaving only a shell that evening, I showed the folder to Alex. I expected outrage on my behalf. I expected him to be furious. What I got was something so much worse. He looked it over, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said finally, that's a lot of money. It's an insult. Alex, they're trying to pay me to quit my job." "No, don't look at it like that," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Look, they're trying to provide for you. They want you to be secure. It's their way of showing they care. They care about controlling me. They think I can be bought." "That's not it," he insisted, his voice starting to get defensive. "It's about tradition in our family. The wives manage the households, the charities, the social calendar. It's a huge, important job. They're just trying to free you up so you can take on that role. Why are you making this so difficult?" And that's when it hit me with the force of a physical blow. You guys, it was like a light switch flipped in my brain. For them, for him. I wasn't a partner to build a new life with. I was a candidate applying for a position. The position was wife of Alex DeVere, and the job description required a complete abdication of my own life. They weren't adding me to their family. They were trying to replace me with a version they could approve of. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left Alex sleeping in my bed and drove to my office. It was almost 3 a.m. The city quiet around me. I walked through the dark, empty hallways of Chen Innovations, the only sound the click of my heels on the polished concrete floor. I went into my office, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, and I turned on my computer. On the screen were the final projections for Project Nightingale, our latest logistics AI. It was revolutionary. It was going to change everything. The projected valuation numbers stared back at me, a string of zeros that dwarfed the generous offer from the DeVeres. I put my head in my hands, not in despair, but in a moment of stark, terrifying clarity. They had offered me a gilded cage, a beautiful, comfortable prison, and the man I loved was holding the door open, telling me how lucky I was to be invited inside. I looked at my name on the screen, Evelyn Chen, CEO, and I knew a choice had to be made. The question was, did I have the strength to make it? The 2 weeks leading up to the engagement party were the longest of my life. Alex and I were living in a state of fragile, unspoken truce. He acted as if that horrifying lunch with his mother had never happened. He didn't mention the leather-bound folder with its insulting allowance proposal, which I had tucked away in my desk drawer like a piece of toxic evidence. He just went back to being the charming, attentive Alex I'd fallen in love with, leaving me to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. But I hadn't. Every time my phone rang and I saw Eleanor's name, my stomach would plummet. Her calls were brief and syrupy sweet, full of little reminders about the party. "We're expecting 200 of our closest friends. Evelyn, you simply must look your best, or I do hope you've cleared your schedule. Planning the wedding will be a full-time job. You know." Each word was a perfectly manicured nail, gently but firmly pushing me into the box she had designed for me. I deflected. I gave non-committal answers. I told myself I was just buying time, waiting for the right moment to have a real, honest conversation with Alex. A conversation where he would finally, truly, hear me. I was waiting for the man who'd laughed when I spilled coffee on him to show up and tell his family that he loved me for my mind and my ambition. Not for my potential to be a pretty ornament on his arm. You know that feeling when you're holding on to hope so tightly, even when your own intuition is screaming at you to let go. I was clinging to the memory of the man I loved, praying he was still in there somewhere, buried under the weight of the DeVere name. I was a fool, and the engagement party was where my foolish hope went to die. The party was, of course, an exercise in obscene opulence. The De Vere estate was transformed. Valets lined the long driveway. A string quartet played softly on the grand terrace. Waiters drifted through the crowd with trays of champagne and impossibly delicate hors d'oeuvres. The entire house was filled with flowers, white roses, lilies, and orchids, their cloying scent mixing with the expensive perfumes of the guests. It was beautiful, flawless, and completely suffocating. I wore a simple, elegant navy blue dress, not from the couturier Eleanor had recommended, but from a designer I admired and had bought with my own money. It was my small, silent act of rebellion. When Eleanor saw me, her eyes flickered over it for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of disapproval before her polite mask slipped back into place. "Evelyn, you look lovely," she said. The guests were all cut from the same cloth old money families. Powerful executives, people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in St. Bart's. They all had the same polite, assessing smiles as Alex introduced me. "So, you're the lucky girl who finally tamed Alex," one man boomed, clapping him on the back. I felt like a prize he had won, a shiny new acquisition to be displayed. I spent the first hour with a champagne flute glued to my hand, smiling until my face ached, nodding along to conversations about yacht clubs and boarding schools. Alex stayed by my side, his hand possessively on the small of my back. To everyone else, we probably looked like the perfect couple, but I could feel the chasm growing between us with every polite, empty exchange. He was in his element. I was an actress in a play I hadn't auditioned for, and I was forgetting my lines. And then, the moment I had been dreading arrived. Richard De Vere tapped a crystal glass with a spoon, the clear, high-pitched sound silencing the murmur of the crowd. All eyes turned to him as he stood in the center of the grand ballroom. "Friends, family," he began, his voice resonant and full of patriarchal authority. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this wonderful occasion. It brings Eleanor and me such joy to see our son, Alex, so happy. He has chosen a wonderful young woman in Evelyn." He smiled in my direction. It felt as cold as a bank vault. "As you all know," he continued, "for the De Veres, family is everything. It is legacy. It is tradition. It is the bedrock upon which everything else is built. We are not just a family. We are a dynasty. And tonight, we are thrilled to be officially welcoming Evelyn into that dynasty." My heart started to pound against my ribs. "Here it comes." Eleanor stepped forward, taking the floor from her husband. She looked every inch the queen surveying her court. "Richard is right," she said, her voice carrying easily across the silent room. "A marriage is more than a union of two people. It is the merging of histories and the creation of a future. It is a sacred contract." She turned her gaze directly to me. Her smile was bright, brittle, and terrifying. "And we are so delighted that Evelyn understands and embraces the traditions of our family. She has agreed to devote herself fully to her new role as Alex's wife and as a De Vere." A murmur of approval went through the crowd. I felt my blood run cold. She has agreed I hadn't agreed to anything. I looked at Alex, but he was beaming, nodding along as if his mother was delivering the gospel truth. He thought I had finally come to my senses. He thought my silence over the past 2 weeks was acceptance. It got worse. "And to commemorate this wonderful commitment," Eleanor said, "Richard and I have had our attorneys prepare the final marital agreements. Just a few formalities, of course, to protect the family legacy that Evelyn will now be a part of." A hush fell over the room as a man in a suit, obviously a lawyer, stepped forward and handed Eleanor a beautiful, leather-bound portfolio. It was identical to the one she had given me at lunch. My stomach churned. This wasn't a private meeting. This was a public spectacle, a coronation where I was expected to kneel. She walked towards me, the portfolio held in her hands like a sacred text. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She stopped right in front of me and Alex. "Darling," she said, her voice soft enough for only those closest to us to hear, but her actions visible to everyone. She opened the portfolio. Inside was the prenuptial agreement, its clauses stark and clinical on the heavy paper. My eyes immediately found the lines I knew would be there. "The undersigned, Evelyn Chen, henceforth agrees to relinquish all professional duties and titles upon the date of marriage. agrees to adopt the surname DeVere exclusively for all legal and social purposes, in consideration of which a trust will be established in her name, managed by the DeVere family estate. It was my surrender, notarized and bound in leather. Then, Eleanor produced a pen. It wasn't just any pen. It was an antique fountain pen, gold and heavy, that she pulled from a small velvet case. It looked like something you'd use to sign a treaty or a death warrant. Just a signature, darling, she whispered, holding the pen out to me. And we can make it all official, a beautiful symbol of your commitment to our son and to our family. The entire world seemed to shrink to that single, terrifying moment. The pen, the paper, the 200 pairs of eyes watching me, waiting for me to perform my final act of submission. And I looked at Alex. You guys, have you ever had a moment where time slows down, where you can literally feel your own heart breaking? Not in a loud dramatic shatter like in the movies, but a slow, cold, quiet splintering. That was it for me. I looked at my fiancé, the man I had loved with every fiber of my being. His face was a mask of cheerful encouragement. He wasn't looking at me with love. He was looking at me with relief, the relief of a man who had finally gotten the difficult, unconventional girlfriend to fall in line. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, a little, go on, get it over with smile. He wasn't my partner. He wasn't my defender. He was their son. And he was waiting for me to sign my life away so that his could continue, undisturbed. The man I loved wasn't in that room. Maybe he had never existed at all. The splintering in my chest stopped. It was replaced by a strange, cold calm, the kind of calm you feel after a storm has passed, leaving devastation in its wake, but also silence, clarity. I took a slow breath. I looked at the pen in Eleanor's hand. I looked at the smug, triumphant smile on her face. I looked at the expectant faces of the crowd. Then, I looked back at Alex one last time, and I saw him for what he was, a handsome, charming, weak-willed stranger. I turned my eyes back to his mother. I didn't take the pen. Instead, I reached out and gently placed my fingers on the leather portfolio. I pushed it slowly, deliberately, back towards her until it touched her hands. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," I said, my voice quiet, but clear and steady. It carried in the silent room. "I can't sign this." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Eleanor's perfect smile froze, then cracked. Alex's face went from relief to confusion, then to panic. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" he hissed. I didn't answer him. I didn't look at him. I looked at his mother. I gave her a small, polite, and final smile. And then I turned around, and I walked away from the pen, away from the contract, away from the man who was no longer my fiancé. I walked through the silent, stunned crowd of strangers. I could feel every single one of their 200 stares on my back. I kept my head held high, my shoulders back, and I did not look back once. I walked out of the grand ballroom, through the intimidating hall with its judging portraits, and out the massive oak door into the cool night air. Each step felt heavier and yet lighter than the last. I was walking away from a future of immense wealth and privilege, but I was walking towards something far more valuable. I was walking towards myself. The drive home from the DeVere estate was an out-of-body experience. I remember the sensation of my hands on the steering wheel, the blur of headlights passing me, the slick sound of my tires on the wet asphalt. But my mind was a million miles away. It was hovering somewhere back in that grand ballroom, watching a ghost version of myself walk away from a life I thought I wanted. There was no crying, not yet. There was just a profound, hollow numbness. It was the quiet, eerie calm in the eye of a hurricane. I got home, parked my car in the garage, and walked into my silent house. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood in the middle of my living room, in the dark, the silhouette of the city skyline framed by my large windows. And that's when my phone started to buzz. It was Alex. Of course, it was Alex. The first call, I ignored. The screen lit up the dark room with his name, a name that suddenly looked foreign and strange. It buzzed again, and again. Then the text started, a rapid-fire barrage of digital panic. "Ev, what are you doing? Call me. Don't be so dramatic. Just come back and we can talk about this. My mother is furious. You embarrassed our entire family. Evelyn, please, I love you. That last one almost broke me. Almost. But the words that preceded it, the accusation, the lack of understanding, the immediate concern for his family's embarrassment over my own were like a splash of ice water. I stared at his name on the screen. And with a final, decisive tap, I powered my phone off. The room plunged back into darkness. The silence was absolute. And in that silence, the hurricane hit. The tears came, hot and furious. It wasn't just sadness, it was a tidal wave of grief, rage, and profound disappointment. I cried for the 2 years I had spent loving a man who wasn't strong enough to love me back. Not really. I cried for the future I had so vividly imagined, a future that had just been revealed to be a gilded cage. I cried for the woman I had almost allowed myself to become a smaller, quieter, more appropriate version of myself. I sank down to my hardwood floor, curled into a ball, and I just let it all out. It was ugly, it was messy, it was necessary. You guys know that one friend, the one who is your ride or die, the one who sees all the red flags waving in your life long before you do, and just waits, patiently and lovingly, for you to finally see them too. For me, that's Maya. Everyone needs a Maya, after a full day of existing on nothing but grief and leftover takeout. I finally turned my phone back on. I ignored the dozens of missed calls and texts from the DeVeres and called the one person I knew would understand. She picked up on the first ring. "Well, it's about time," she said, her voice completely devoid of surprise. "Spill it. Did you finally escape from the Stepford Wives cult?" I let out a watery laugh that turned into a sob. "Maya." "I'm coming over," she said, and the line went dead. An hour later, she was at my door with 2 pints of the most expensive, artery-clogging ice cream she could find and a bottle of ridiculously good bourbon. She didn't say a word. She just wrapped me in a hug, led me to the sofa, handed me a spoon, and sat with me while I told her everything. The dinner, the gifts, the lunch, and finally, the public execution that was supposed to be my engagement party. When I finished, my voice hoarse, Maya just shook her head slowly, a look of righteous fury in her eyes. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "That woman, that talking Chanel ad with the soul of a corporate raider, handed you a contract to buy your identity in front of 200 people. And Alex, what did Alex do?" "He smiled," I whispered. "He wanted me to sign it." "Of course, he did," Maya scoffed, stabbing her spoon into the ice cream. "Because he's a coward. Ev, listen to me. You didn't lose anything tonight. You escaped. You dodged a bullet the size of their damn mansion. They didn't want a daughter-in-law. Honey, they wanted to stage a hostile takeover of your soul." Her words were harsh, but they were exactly what I needed to hear. They were the truth. "He said he loved me. Maya?" "Oh, I'm sure he does," she said, softening her tone slightly. "He loves the idea of you. He loves how you make him feel, but he's not in love with you. A man who's in love with you does not stand by silently while his family tries to dismantle you piece by piece. He builds a wall around you and tells them to back the hell off. Alex isn't a wall. He's a welcome mat for his mother's shoes to walk all over you." We sat there for hours, talking and crying and eating ice cream straight from the carton. It's a special kind of hell when someone tries to make you feel crazy for having feelings. Right? Alex had tried to convince me I was being difficult and dramatic. Maya, in her blunt, beautiful way, was telling me that my feelings were not just valid. They were a survival instinct. "So what now?" she finally asked, looking at me. A month ago, that question would have terrified me. The idea of a life without Alex would have felt like a black hole. But now, after the storm, there was that strange, quiet calm again. But it wasn't numbness this time. It was something else. It was resolve. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But something else was stirring beside it, a low, rumbling heat. It was the part of me that had built a company from scratch. The part of me that had faced down skeptical venture capitalists and ruthless competitors. The part of me that had been dormant for 2 years, lulled into a sense of safety by a man I loved. It was my ambition, my pride. It was the sleeping dragon. And it was finally starting to wake up. Now, I said, my voice clearer than it had been in days. I go back to work. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose. I bypassed my usual wardrobe of soft sweaters and jeans, the clothes of the woman who was trying to be softer, more approachable. I went to the back of my closet and pulled out my armor, a sharp, black, impeccably tailored suit. High heels that clicked with authority on the floor. I put my hair up in a sleek, no-nonsense ponytail. As I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the heartbroken fiancé. I saw a CEO. I saw Evelyn Chen. Walking into the offices of Chen Innovations felt like coming home. The familiar buzz of activity, the clatter of keyboards, the intense debates happening in front of whiteboards. This was my world. This was the kingdom I had built. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, looked up in surprise. Ms. Chen, I wasn't expecting you in today. Clear my schedule for the rest of the day, Sarah, I said, my voice crisp. And call an emergency meeting with the executive team, conference room A, in 1 hour. Yes, ma'am, she said, already typing furiously. An hour later, I was standing at the head of the long boardroom table. My CTO, Ben, a genius coder who had been with me from the garage days, looked at me with concern. Ev, you okay? You look focused, I finished for him. Ben, bring up the latest projections for Project Nightingale. The screen behind me lit up with charts, data streams, and our projected timeline for the launch of our new proprietary AI. It was our magnum opus, the technology that would revolutionize the entire shipping and logistics industry. We had been planning a slow, steady rollout for the end of the next fiscal year. The timeline, I said, turning to face my team. It's too slow. I want to accelerate it. A murmur went through the room. Ben pushed his glasses up his nose. Accelerate, Evelyn. We're talking about a 6-month push. That's aggressive. That's almost impossible. Almost, I agreed. But not for us. I want to launch in 4 months. And I don't just want to launch. I want to launch big. I want to pair the launch with an acquisition. I want to buy out Logisphere. Now there were gasps. Logisphere was our biggest, most aggressive competitor. Acquiring them wasn't just a business move. It was a declaration of war. Their Q3 earnings were weaker than expected. I continued, pacing now, the energy buzzing under my skin. Their board is nervous. They're vulnerable. I want you to draw up an offer. Ben, a generous one, but a firm one. We move on them next week. While they're reeling, we launch Nightingale. We don't just enter the market. We conquer it. The room was silent. My team looked at me, a new kind of fire in my eyes. The last 2 years, I had been a good CEO. I had been steady, strategic, reliable. They hadn't seen this side of me in a long time, the hungry, relentless founder who had built this place on sheer force of will. Ben was the first to break the silence. A slow smile spread across his face. Okay, he said, a new excitement in his voice. Okay, boss, let's wake the dragon. I smiled back, and for the first time in a long time, it reached my eyes. Exactly. The De Veers thought my little company was a hobby. They thought my name was just a common placeholder, waiting to be replaced by theirs. They were about to learn, in the most public and undeniable way possible, just how wrong they were. They had no idea who they had been talking to, but they would, the whole world would. For 3 weeks, my world was silent. I had erected a wall of pure, unadulterated focus around myself. And on the other side of that wall, the De Veers ceased to exist. Alex's text went from panicked Evelyn. We need to talk to angry. I can't believe you're being so childish to pleading I miss you. Please, just call me. They were like pebbles thrown against a fortress. I read them, felt a distant pang of something that might have once been love, and then archived them without replying. Inside my fortress, I was anything but silent. I was a general preparing for war. My days were a whirlwind of meetings, strategic planning sessions, and late-night coding with Ben and the Project Nightingale team. The grief I felt over losing Alex hadn't vanished. But I'd learned to channel it. It was no longer a debilitating poison. It was fuel. Every condescending word Eleanor had spoken, every time Alex had failed to defend me, became another gallon of high-octane rocket fuel, propelling my ambition forward. The dragon was fully awake now, and she was hungry. The acquisition plan for Logosphere was moving at lightning speed. Our offer was ready. The launch sequence for Nightingale was being fast-tracked. I was operating on 4 hours of sleep, a diet of black coffee and pure adrenaline, and I had never felt more alive. I had remembered who I was, after 3 weeks of silence. I knew it was time. You can't just ghost the family of one of the East Coast's most prominent dynasties. Not if you want a clean break. A messy ending would leave threads, and I wanted cauterized wounds, no lingering connections. I needed one final, in-person meeting, not for them, for me. I needed to close this chapter myself, on my own terms. I didn't call. That would have been the old Evelyn's move, personal, emotional, accommodating. Instead, I had my assistant, Sarah, compose a formal email to Eleanor DeVere. Subject: meeting request from Ms. Evelyn Chen. Dear Mrs. DeVere, Ms. Chen would like to request a meeting with you, Mr. DeVere, and Alex at your earliest convenience to provide her definitive answer regarding the proposed marital agreements. Please let me know what time works best for you. Sincerely, Sarah Caldwell, Executive Assistant to Evelyn Chen, CEO, Chen Innovations. Every word was deliberate. Miss Evelyn Chen, CEO, Chen Innovations. It was a subtle but clear reassertion of the identity they had tried to erase. The reply came less than an hour later. Eleanor DeVere would be pleased to host Miss Chen tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the family residence. I knew exactly what they were thinking. Their little bird had finally decided to come back to its gilded cage. Their arrogance was so predictable. They would be sitting there, smug and triumphant, ready to receive my formal surrender. They had no idea I was coming to accept their unconditional surrender instead. Okay, you guys, you know that feeling when you're about to do something terrifying, but also incredibly, wildly liberating. That was me in the back of the town car the next evening, gliding up that long gravel driveway to the DeVere mansion. My heart was pounding, a hard, fast rhythm against my ribs, but for the first time. It wasn't a rhythm of anxiety. It was a war drum. I had chosen my armor with care, no more simple, non-threatening dresses. Tonight, I wore a pantsuit, a beautifully tailored, razor-sharp suit in a shade of cobalt blue so vivid it felt electric. Underneath, a simple silk shell. My heels were high and sharp. My hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. My makeup was flawless. With a bold red lip, I was not dressed as Alex's fiancé. I was dressed as his boss's boss's boss. The same butler opened the door. His placid expression flickered with surprise for a fraction of a second as he took in my appearance. Miss Chen, he said, his voice a little less sure than last time. They are waiting for you in the living room. I walked into that grand, intimidating room, and the scene was exactly as I had pictured it. Eleanor and Richard were seated on the pristine cream sofa. Alex and his sister, Catherine, were in matching armchairs. They were arranged like a panel of judges, a tribunal ready to deliver a verdict that they believed was already decided. A bottle of champagne was chilling in a silver bucket nearby, ready for a celebration, my capitulation. Alex's face lit up with relief when he saw me. He stood up, taking a step forward. Evelyn, thank God, I was so worried. I gave him a cool, polite smile that didn't reach my eyes and stopped several feet away from him. Remaining standing, Eleanor gestured to the empty chair opposite them. Evelyn, darling, do sit down. We're so glad you've decided to be reasonable. We knew you'd make the right choice for the family. Her voice was thick with satisfaction. Thank you, Eleanor, but I prefer to stand, I said calmly. Her smile tightened infinitesimally. The first flicker of doubt, I had gone off script. I won't take up much of your time, I continued. My voice even and clear, projecting through the cavernous room. I requested this meeting to give you my answer in person, as I felt you deserved that courtesy. I let my gaze travel over each of them. Richard, looking stern and impatient. Catherine, looking smug. Eleanor, the picture of condescending grace. And finally, Alex. He looked confused, like a puppy who couldn't understand a new command. The ache in my chest was still there, but it was a phantom limb now, a memory of a pain, not a fresh wound. Over the past few weeks, I said, I have given a great deal of thought to your proposed marital agreements. I have also had time to reflect on the values and expectations of the DeVere family. My eyes flicked back to Alex. And most importantly, I've reflected on my relationship with Alex and the kind of partnership I require in my life. A partnership built on mutual respect, support, and the celebration of each other's identities and strengths. Alex nodded eagerly. Exactly, Ev, that's all I want. He still didn't get it. And so, I said, my voice dropping slightly, becoming more formal. After careful consideration, my definitive answer is no. The silence in the room was so absolute. I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. No, Catherine repeated, a disbelieving laugh escaping her lips. No, I affirmed, my gaze unwavering as I looked at Eleanor. I will not be signing your agreement. I will not be quitting my job. And I will not be taking your name. Eleanor's face, for the first time since I'd met her, lost its composure. Her polite mask crumbled, revealing the raw, ugly shock beneath. What did you say? And furthermore, I said, turning my full attention to Alex, who looked like he'd been slapped. I will not be marrying you. I held up my left hand, the diamond on my finger, the one he'd placed there under the cherry blossoms. Felt like a foreign object. It was beautiful, but it wasn't mine. It belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. With my other hand, I slowly, deliberately twisted the ring off my finger. It slid off with a whisper. I walked the few steps to where Alex was standing, frozen. I took his hand. It was cold. I gently placed the ring into his palm and closed his fingers around it. I wish you the best, Alex, I said softly, and I meant it. I hope you find someone who's happy to fit the role you need them to play. But that person isn't me. I stepped back. The shock in the room was palpable. It was Richard who spoke first. His voice, a low growl. You foolish girl. Do you have any idea what you are throwing away? Oh, I think I do, I said, turning to face him. It was Eleanor who delivered the line I had been waiting for. She stood up, her body trembling with a rage she could no longer contain. How dare you after we offered you a life you could only dream of, you ungrateful little nobody. You will never be worthy of the DeVere name. There it was, the word, worthy. I stopped at the doorway, turning back to face them one last time. I let a small, genuine smile touch my lips. You know, Eleanor, I said, my voice calm and carrying a power that silenced them all. You're absolutely right about one thing. I'm not worthy of the DeVere name. I let the words hang in the air. Let them savor their fleeting, mistaken victory. Then I delivered the final blow. Because it isn't worthy of mine. I looked at each of their stunned, uncomprehending faces. I'm keeping my own name, I said, letting them hear it, really hear it for the first time. Evelyn Chen. And with that, I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't storm off. I walked with the unhurried, unshakable confidence of a queen leaving a room full of court jesters. I heard Eleanor shriek my name in frustration behind me, but I didn't falter. I walked out the door, into the cool night air, feeling the weight of the last 2 years lift from my shoulders with every step. I was free. My driver held the door of the town car open for me. As I slid into the plush leather seat, I felt my phone buzz in my purse. I pulled it out. It wasn't Alex. It wasn't a DeVere. It was a notification from my CTO, Ben. The offer for Logosphere has been sent. The dragon is loose. I leaned my head back against the seat and smiled. The DeVeres thought they were a dynasty. They had no idea I was in the middle of building an empire. The month that followed my walkout from the DeVere mansion was the most intensely focused period of my life. The world outside my work bubble simply ceased to exist. I muted the group chat with my college friends. I let my subscription to the New Yorker pile up, unread. My diet consisted of whatever could be delivered to the office in under 30 minutes. My world shrank to the glowing screens, complex algorithms, and endless coffee that fueled Chen innovations. There was no room for heartbreak when you were in the middle of a corporate hostile takeover. The silence from the DeVeres was absolute. I imagined that in their world. I had simply ceased to exist. I was the foolish, ungrateful girl who had fumbled the opportunity of a lifetime. They had likely already scrubbed me from their history. A minor, Embarrassing footnote in the grand saga of their dynasty. Alex had tried to call a few more times in the first week, his voicemails growing more and more bewildered. But eventually, even those stopped. The silence wasn't painful, it was peaceful. It was the clean, sterile quiet of a server room, where everything was running exactly as it should. Our offer for Logosphere had been, as I'd instructed, both generous and aggressive. They were bleeding market share, and their board was in a panic. We were offering them a golden parachute, a dignified exit before their stock became worthless. It was an offer they couldn't refuse, for 2 weeks. My legal team and Ben's tech integration squad worked around the clock. We were a well-oiled machine. Fueled by caffeine and the sheer, exhilarating thrill of the hunt, I was in my element. This was my world. A world of strategy and logic and clear-eyed execution. It was a world where worth wasn't determined by your last name, but by the quality of your code and the strength of your vision. The deal closed on a Thursday. There was no dramatic signing ceremony with antique fountain pens. It was just a series of encrypted digital signatures exchanged between law firms at 2:17 a.m. Ben and I were the only ones left in the office, watching the final confirmation come through on my laptop. "It's done," I whispered, the words feeling huge in the quiet room. Ben let out a long, slow breath he seemed to have been holding for a week. A wide, exhausted grin spread across his face. "We did it, Ev. We actually did it. We swallowed the whale?" We didn't pop champagne. That wasn't our style. We toasted with lukewarm coffee and Chen Innovations mugs, and then went back to work, planning the integration and the public announcement. The announcement was timed to coincide with an exclusive feature. I had, for the first time, agreed to an in-depth interview and photo shoot with Forbes. My PR team had been begging me to do it for years, to put a face to the company. I had always refused, valuing my anonymity. But now, my anonymity was no longer serving me. It was time to claim my name, all of it. You guys, have you ever had that fantasy, the one where you run into an ex or someone who wronged you, and you're just thriving? You look amazing, your life is incredible, and they're forced to see exactly what they walked away from. Well, buckle up, buttercups, because my fantasy was about to come true in a way I could never have imagined, and it was going to be broadcast on the front page of the financial world. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. My phone started buzzing before I was even out of bed. It was a text from Maya. All it contained was a link to the Forbes website and a single sentence. "The dragon is loose and she is on the cover of Forbes." I am screaming. I clicked the link, and there I was. It was a powerful shot. They'd taken it in our main server hall, with me standing in my cobalt blue suit amidst the racks of humming, blinking machines. The headline was splashed across the top in bold, white letters. "The Ghost in the Machine: How Evelyn Chen Quietly Built a Logistics Empire and Swallowed Her Biggest Rival in a $3.2 billion Power Play." The article was thorough. It told the whole story. The college dorm room startup, the proprietary code of Project Nightingale, the years of quiet, relentless work. My face, my name, my net worth, it was all there, laid out for the world to see. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. My ghost days were officially over. I can only imagine how the news broke in the House of DeVere. I picture Richard, sitting at his massive mahogany desk in his study. The Wall Street Journal spread before him. I see him reading the business section, his eyes scanning the story about the Logosphere acquisition. I see his eyebrows furrow as he reads the name of the acquiring company, Chen Innovations. Chen. He'd think, what a common name. Then I see him look at the accompanying photo, and his blood run cold. I see the paper tremble in his hands as he connects the foolish girl his son brought home to the ghost in the machine, who had just rocked the tech world. I picture Eleanor at her weekly bridge game at the country club. I see one of her friends, a woman named Bitsy, or Muffy, leaning over and whispering, "Eleanor, my dear, have you seen the news about that Chen girl, the one who bought Logosphere? Isn't that the same young woman your Alex was engaged to?" I see Eleanor's perfectly manicured hand freeze over her cards, her polite smile becoming a brittle, cracking facade. I see her trying to dismiss it, to pretend it's a different Evelyn Chen, but the accompanying picture on her friend's iPad makes that impossible. I picture Catherine scrolling through her Instagram feed, seeing post after post from business influencers about the deal, seeing my face, and feeling a surge of raw, venomous jealousy so intense it probably made her choke on her kale smoothie. And Alex, I picture him getting a frantic call from his father. Turn on CNBC, son, now. And I see him watching, his face going from confusion to slack-jawed disbelief as my face fills the screen and the anchors discuss the monumental deal, repeating my name over and over, Evelyn Chen, Evelyn Chen, Evelyn Chen. The name they thought was so insignificant, so unworthy, was now the name of the newest titan in a multi-billion-dollar industry. The irony was so rich, so delicious, it was almost comical. The generous allowance they had offered me to give up my little hobby wouldn't have even covered the catering budget for our company's launch party. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had displayed a level of willful ignorance so profound it was breathtaking. They were so blinded by their own snobbery, so convinced of the superiority of their old money name, that they never even bothered to run a simple Google search on the woman their son was supposed to marry. The first call came that afternoon. It was Alex this time, I answered. I owed myself the satisfaction of hearing what he had to say. Evelyn, he sounded breathless, panicked. Hello, Alex, I said, my voice perfectly calm. I was sitting in my office, looking out at the city skyline, my city. I saw the article, Forbes, he stammered. The acquisition, the numbers, my God, Ev. I had no idea. Yes, Alex, I said, a cool smile touching my lips. You didn't. There was a pause, filled with the sound of his ragged breathing. Why didn't you tell me, he finally asked, his voice a whisper of accusation and awe. Would it have mattered, I asked, the question genuine, if I had told you my net worth? Would that have made you stand up to your mother? Would my money have suddenly made me worthy of your name? He didn't have an answer. Of course, he didn't. Evelyn, I am so sorry, he pleaded, the desperation pouring through the phone. I was an idiot, a blind, stupid idiot. My family, we were so wrong. I see that now. God, I love you. We can fix this. I swear. I'll stand up to them. I'll leave them if I have to. We can get married. You can keep your name, your company, anything you want. It was quite the speech, passionate, convincing. A month ago, it would have been everything I wanted to hear. But now, it was just noise. Alex, I said, cutting through his rambling. The time to stand up for me was when I was standing next to you at our engagement party. And you said nothing. I know, and I regret it every single day. Do you? I asked, my voice still calm, almost conversational. Or do you regret that you backed the wrong horse? You didn't fall in love with me, Alex. You fell in love with a version of me that you thought was safe. That wouldn't challenge your world. The woman you wanted me to be, the one who arranges flowers and chairs charity benefits. She wouldn't have been capable of building what I have. She doesn't exist. I let that sink in. You didn't just underestimate my company, I said, delivering the final lines of our story. You underestimated me, and that, Alex, is not something we can fix. Evelyn, wait. Goodbye, Alex, I said softly. And I ended the call. I stared at his name on my screen for a long moment. Then, with a feeling of profound, final, and deeply satisfying peace, I blocked his number. I blocked Eleanor's. I blocked Catherine's. I severed the last digital threads connecting me to the House of DeVere. The deafening sound of their regret was a symphony. But it was a symphony I no longer had any interest in listening to. I had my own empire to run. It's funny how time works. For 2 years, every minute I spent with Alex felt like a precious, fleeting moment. The month after I walked out of his life felt like a decade. But the year that followed, it went by in the blink of an eye. A brilliant, blinding, beautiful flash of hard work, self-discovery, and the profound peace that comes from finally, truly inhabiting your own life. I'm telling you this from my office, the real one, not the small consulting space I used to tell people about. We now occupy the top 3 floors of one of the newest skyscrapers in the city. The name Chen Innovations is emblazoned in sleek, minimalist letters in the lobby. From my window, I can see the entire city spread out like a glittering circuit board. I can even see the distant, stuffy neighborhood where the De Veres live. A small patch of old-world darkness in a city blazing with new light. The Logosphere acquisition was a roaring success. Project Nightingale, my beautiful revolutionary AI, rolled out and did exactly what I knew it would. It changed the game. We didn't just enter the market, we redefined it. Our stock price soared. My face, Evelyn Chen's face, was on magazine covers again. But this time I wasn't terrified. I owned it. This was who I was. I had spent 2 years trying to dim my own light so I wouldn't blind the man I loved. Now, I was learning to enjoy the glare. And what of the De Veres? You guys are probably wondering what happened to them, right? Well, there was no grand, cinematic downfall where they lost everything and had to sell the family silver. Old money doesn't usually die that dramatically. It just fades. I heard through the business grapevine that De Vere Industries had a bad year, a very bad year. A few of their key investments soured, and their refusal to adapt to new technologies like mine, had left their company looking like a relic. Their legacy, the one they were so desperate to protect, was slowly crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. There was a quiet, poetic justice in that. They had worshipped the past, and now they were being consumed by it. Catherine. From what I saw on the society pages, Maya would occasionally send me with a laughing emoji, was still flitting from one charity gala to another, her smile looking a little tighter, a little more brittle, with each photo. And Alex, about 6 months ago, I saw the announcement in the New York Times. He was engaged again, to a woman whose family had been summering next to the De Veres in the Hamptons for 3 generations. Her name was something like Buffy or Kiki, and the announcement photo showed her looking up at him with wide, adoring, and completely vacant eyes. She looked perfect for the role. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no jealousy, no lingering pain. It was like reading about a business merger between 2 companies I no longer had any stock in. I truly wish them the best. They deserved each other. I know some of you might be thinking, what about the love? Was it all fake? No. The love I felt was real. But I've learned a hard lesson, you guys. And I want you to hear this. You can love someone with your entire soul. But if that person requires you to be smaller, to be quieter, to be less of who you are so that they can feel comfortable, then it's not love, it's possession. Love doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller. It gives you the space to grow as big as you are meant to be. Alex didn't want a partner. He wanted a beautiful, well-managed subsidiary. He didn't want my strength. He wanted my surrender. The tragedy wasn't that I lost him. The tragedy was that I almost lost myself. My life now is so much bigger and brighter than the one he and his family had offered me. It's not just about the money, though let's be real. The money is nice. It's nice to be able to provide for my parents, to set up scholarships at my old university, to fund other young women in tech with ideas that the world isn't ready for yet. That's the real power of the fortune my name carries, the power to build, to create, to lift others up. But the real richness of my life isn't on a balance sheet. It's in the late nights spent with Ben and my team, sketching out new, impossible ideas on a whiteboard. It's in the ridiculously fun, impromptu trips I take with Maya, just because we can. Last month it was Tokyo for the best sushi of our lives. Next month, who knows, it's in the quiet satisfaction of walking into a boardroom and knowing that I belong there. Not because of who I married, but because of what I built. I'm not dating anyone seriously right now. For a while, I thought that meant there was something missing. I thought I needed to find a new love story to complete my own. But I've realized that this past year hasn't been about finding a new partner. It's been about falling back in love with myself. It's about rebuilding my own foundation. A foundation so strong that no one will ever be able to ask me to tear it down for them again. So this is my final message to you. To anyone who has ever felt like they were being asked to shrink. To anyone who has ever been told they weren't worthy. Your name, your history, your ambition, your little hobbies. They are not trivial details. They are the core of who you are. They are your strength. Do not ever, for any reason, let someone convince you that you need to trade them in for a new set that they find more acceptable. Don't let them put a price tag on your soul. They will always, always undervalue it. You are not an acquisition. You are an empire. So don't try to fit into their cramped, dusty old mansion. Go out and build your own damn palace, and then build a skyscraper next to it just for fun. Thank you guys so much for coming along on this insane journey with me, this community, sharing our stories. It means the world if you've ever had to walk away from something that was trying to make you smaller. I want to hear about it in the comments. Your stories remind all of us that we're not alone. Don't forget to hit that like button if this resonated with you. And please subscribe for more stories about building your own damn palace. Know your worth. And never, ever let anyone else define it for you. I'll see you in the next one.